the Audit Survival Guide, followed by the Festival Survival Guide. So, Clue, we'll let you start your audio and kick things off.
Yep. All right. Let's share some things. Tell me when I'm good to go.
Let's make sure we're good. All right. We're looking good on the stream. So you're all set.
Wonderful. Hello, everybody. Question is, we're at an InfoSec conference. Why the hell am I talking about audits, right? And unless you're involved in one, right? Audits are this like abstract concept with some many preconceived notions, right? So all I'm going to try to do today is kind of demystify the topic a little bit, like take away some of the apprehension, give some basic advice, right? Because there are some scenarios, especially when we're like at the beginning of our career, when we're going to stumble into this without being prepared. Like, let's say you're the only IT guy at this fancy biotech startup, and now the FDA is coming paying you a visit, cool. Right? Or your line manager is on vacation, and now you are basically the only guy who knows about identity and access management, right? Or you are tasked with managing the infrastructure and services during an audit, right? All of those are reasons where you will end up involved in this without any formal training or prep. So who am I? My name is kluthulhu, or just Clue. I started my career in reg engineering and testing, mostly for like regulated industries. Was usually the only one talking about security and privacy in those projects. And I kind of stumbled into information management from then. And as part of that, then quality, governance, the whole shebang. And audit prep and audit management was more of like a side effect, right? First, I started designing and testing systems that would be under audit scrutiny, then managing the systems that had the data that auditors wanted to see, right? So just a short disclaimer, anything I say today, of course, is my personal view and not any employer. I'm not going to name my employer, but I'm not so hard to OSINT, so, right? And any anecdotes that might happen today will not be from my current employer. Makes sense. All right. Expectation versus reality. Let's start by dispelling the misconceptions. The vast majority of audits are routine and cooperative. What do I mean by that? They're required by some sort of quality framework, or regulators, depending on your industry, require them. And the same goes for your customers, right? Depending on what customers you have, they're going to ask you, we want to come audit you, right? And in most cases, they're announced weeks or even months ahead of time, right? Audited party has limited input on times and dates. Auditing party sends a plan, a schedule, what they want to look at, and so on, right? So this is not like you're not getting ambushed by it. Now, with that said, sometimes audits are indeed unannounced, but unannounced does not mean that they're unexpected, right? Some of them are just still routine. They're part of your same quality framework that has the announced ones. However, unexpected or adversarial audits do happen, right? Usually reserved for cases where misbehavior is suspected, like dawn raids, or the absence of an, right? So if you're ever pulled into an audit and no one's giving you a different explanation as to why you're here, right? So I'm like, hey, Joe, we need you to talk about X, Y, Z, then maybe get defensive. But apart from that, chill, right? Now, the rest of the talk will only focus on everything that I said is routine, because that is what 99.9% of the time is going to be the stuff you will be facing or involved as IT. Also, it's what I know most, right? All right. A lot of the planning and preparing goes into audit readiness, but that's a subject for another talk. But a lot of effort goes into setting up and maintaining a controlled environment, right? That's part of the mystique. If you've been around, it's like, oh, don't go over there into that meeting room, right? There's an audit in progress. So just to understand a bit the logistics, usually you will have like an audit room, which can also be called like a front office, inspection room, interview room, whatever. That's usually where the auditors, your colleagues who are managing them, and any sort of scribes are sitting, right? It's like an interview room. Then you have usually a second room, which is ready room. So you have some coordinators, again, scribes, ops support. Basically, they're running more or less incident response for this, right? And sometimes they're going to run around doing visits of facilities, server rooms, and so on, right? And the scribes will always be relaying information between them. So again, everything is about a controlled environment. So let's say you're getting this dreaded call. Hi, this is Joe from Quality. The auditor has a question on topic X, and you're listed as someone who can provide some answers. First thing is breathe, right? This isn't like a building on fire situation. You are not expected to rush to the interview room in the next 5 minutes, right? Usually your back office will tell you at what time they're expecting you, but it's not like run down, right? Before you do anything else, clarify with them what the scope of the audit is, on what topics you will be questioned, right? If you're expected to provide any additional material, right? And once you know that, you can start preparing for it, right? Prepare yourself, anything you need or have been asked to provide, get yourself a notepad or something like that, and then clear your schedule. Because nothing's worse than going in and then being asked to run out again. Because basically, even if you are working in like incident response or something like that, this interview is now your incident, right? There's very little that can be more important than that. And then just go, right? Maybe detour to the restroom if you feel so like that, but just go down calmly, nothing to be scared of. Once you're there, first and foremost, I think that's something that really needs to be hammered into everyone's head. This isn't about you, right? This is not a performance review. This is the company being audited, not you personally, right? You are providing some insight into some specific area of work that you know about, right? But take it seriously, right? Basic stuff. Take your phone off. If your company, stupid thing, like if your company has a badge policy, then don't leave your badge upstairs or have it hidden, right? It's the small stuff like that. This whole thing is going to be about the role you happen to fill at that company, right? So describe, explain your role in the job that you do. Be able to describe and identify any like procedures and other written stuff that governs your work. Describe the interfaces with your customers, your colleagues, and so on, right? Basically, you should be able to tell them what the cog in the company machinery you are, right? And of course, provide documentation of your actions, etc. Right? Demonstrate your work, maybe, possibly. Now, there's a flip side to this. This isn't about you, right? An audit is not the place to flaunt your skills, right? So don't overstep. Speak only for yourself. Clarify the limit of your responsibilities. If you're being asked about stuff you're not responsible for, don't step around the problem. Just tell them, nah, I don't know. This is not really what I do every day. And that's fine, right? Especially don't talk about someone else's job. Don't critique someone else's job. Again, right? Do not blame or complain about anything or anyone other than what you do, right? Audit is a snapshot anyway. And also, I know it's going to sound stupid, but do not start back-talking or critiquing the auditors because you don't want to alienate them. Because even if you manage your interview well, you can't be sure that every colleague after that is going to handle it well. So, don't be an asshole. Or in general, don't antagonize, right? And most importantly, and I think that's the last part, and it goes back to This is not about flaunting your skills. Don't be a smartass, right? No. Right? So in short, this is basically a friendly interview, right? Don't turn it into a performance of yourself or an interrogation. Sounds easy. So let's go. Most of the interview will basically be a straightforward series of questions, right? So before you do anything else, like, be sure you understand what the question is before answering, right? If you do not understand the question, ask for clarification. Specify if the question is not in your area of expertise, right? Take your time. Yeah? What information needs to be part of your answer? How do I structure my answer to get my point across? And only then give your answer, right? By the way, any resemblance to the input, process, output idea is purely coincidental. All right. Understanding, a few details that might be interesting. This is not a frequent problem in the US, but if you and the auditor don't speak the same language, at least not fluently, that is not your problem, right? Translators are a thing. If the auditors are in a foreign country, they're supposed to bring translators. If you work in a country which is not your native language, then that is on the back office to get a translator in so that they can translate, right? Don't stifle your possibility or ability to explain stuff just because you're trying to do it in a language you are not fluent with, right? Focus on the question itself, right? Don't start like formulating your answer until you've heard the question in full, because you're not going to pay attention to what is being asked. And don't side-eye your colleague like you're looking for approval. It's like, you're at that point, you're the subject matter expert in the room, right? And if there's any like edge case where you shouldn't be answering or something, that's on your senior colleagues who are managing the audit to stop you, basically, right? And again, if you have any doubt, ask for clarifications. Turn hypothetical questions. If you're being asked a hypothetical question, ask them to rephrase that as a concrete one, right? Don't go with like, don't answer a question like, oh, what would you do if? No, this is about what do you do when, right? And a good way to do that, by the way, is to rephrase a question, right? So, okay, so if I understand you correctly, what you mean is, and so on, right? And most importantly, know your limits. If this is outside of your scope, beyond your understanding, say so. Thinking, so the second part of our little process model. This is going to sound super obvious, I know, but think about what you want to say and how you want to say it. Don't rush to start talking, right? This isn't an exam. There's no like time limit, right? Stay factual and on topic, right? No assumptions like, oh, I think this is that, or I assume, or I guess, no. Or my favorite one is like, well, to be honest, because at that moment, I'm going to ask you, well, are you not honest the rest of the time, right? Don't blame someone else. We had it already, but like, things like, oh, no, that's not my problem. Or, nah, that's too expensive. Or, this is an edge case. No, right? And most importantly, don't deflect, right? Something like, oh, we always used to do it this way, or I don't care, or stuff like that. It's like, no, right? And then to the answer itself, well, just like the thought process, don't rush it, right? Take your time. Talk slowly, talk clearly. Take a breather after sentences, right? If you're asked for or need documentation, or let's say they ask you to bring like a 20-page SOP and they want to know specifically what's in there or a specific question on it, point them to the exact page of it, right? And if you're asked to demonstrate something, let's say you're a system owner or something, stick to like some common use case, not some weird edge case where you can again demonstrate how cool you are. And then the most important part, stop when you're done. Again, sounds stupid, but it's not your job to keep the conversation going, right? Silence is okay, especially when you have like people around you all taking notes. And if you want to be really fancy, you can always end it with, yeah, did that answer your question? Do you have any follow-up, right? And that's already about it. Again, this is all about like demystifying this concept, which is really not as scary as some people make it sound. I have some closing general thoughts that I think should be some takeaways. First of all, an audit is not about perfection. It is about control, right? Stable and mature procedures are king, right? Some deviations or errors will inevitably happen in any company, right? It is how you handle them that is important. I said it before, the auditor is not your enemy, but it is still their job to find stuff, right? They will not prevent you from running off a cliff, right? That's why they use conversation techniques like staying silent for like half a minute, or baiting you into answering stuff that is not in your scope, right? Again, they're not being mean, it's their job. And last thing is, if you're interested in anything in that broad area, there are a few things that transfer, that are not specific to this area of work, like conversation techniques such as active listening. You can use that anywhere, whether you're a project manager, whether you're developing something and are talking to your customers. All of this is relevant in most areas of our work, right? And if you ever want to get into any sort of ops or incident response, running the prep room or the back office, depending on how big the whole thing is pretty much the same. It's basically incident response and operations. And with that, do we have any questions on this part? I don't see any in Slack. So unless anyone types something right now, we're going to move on to the less formal part. Festivals. Ha! All right. Well, just like for most of us, COVID kind of ruined my summer last year, right? I'm not the only one. I'm getting a question. Okay, kidding aside, can you touch on working with internal versus external ones? I would say you can. There are two things that I've seen often. One is you need to explain more to external auditors, because even basic things like your IT infrastructure or like logon procedures or something like that, an internal auditor mostly knows that. An external might need to get that explained, right? That's one part. And the second part is, of course, an internal will have usually even more info on you beforehand. At least that's the experience I've had. But apart from that, that's more on the back office, basically telling me, hey, this is an external audit, or this is one of our customers, and these are maybe some touchy subjects, right? That, again, is part of this like operation and incident response part. Can you share an example of people not following recommendations? Yeah, I have to pick something that is some time ago. Oh yeah, there's a good one. So when auditors are here for an extended amount of time, they'll usually eat on site. And we've had one that's like a decade ago, where basically some colleagues who ran the audit office basically let them run loose on campus for the hour of lunch without accompanying them. And basically they spent their hour in the canteen and listening to the chatter from colleagues. And they picked up some stuff that was interesting, and it ruined our whole afternoon. So that's one thing. I know I didn't touch on it because that's more on the side of like the audit manager up top, but it should come without saying. If you have externals coming into your site, especially if they're digging, maybe don't let them just run free, right? Again, we're supposed to have a controlled environment, so that includes breaks, right? All right, festivals again. Basically, this is my weird and messed up way of reminiscing about last summer or the summers before, and maybe give a few pointers to those of you who hopefully get to enjoy some live events soon, right? So most of this will be based on my experience at larger festivals, like something like this, right? But most of it will also apply to any sort of similar outdoorsy event, right? So I've been a volunteer medic for like 20 years now. I've loved live music for even longer. And most of what I say, just like the first part, will sound stupidly obvious, right? But I can tell you, just from patient, I think we have a question in the wrong channel here, but all right. Most of what I say will sound super basic and obvious, just based on patient conversations I've had and the injury patterns I've seen. I assure you it is not. Just a short disclaimer, because we are a PG-13 conference, this talk will have zero explicit medical imagery. I will not go into any sort of medical, gruesome, depressing, or whatever detail. So you're good. So some prep work. I'm going to cheat a little bit because I didn't go into any sort of InfoSec topic actually in the first part. So I'm going to touch on it a little bit now. Do some OSINT, kind of. What I mean is most larger events have a treasure trove of information available to help you prepare and have a better time as a result, right? Just some general information like area maps, timetables, opening hours, right? Also, what you can buy on site versus what you need to bring or buy along the way, right? Most festivals are quite isolated out of necessity for the space they need, right? Some will have a small shop on site, some don't. Also, what are you allowed to bring onto the campground or the infield, right? Just for explanation, campground is where you camp, infield is the area next to the stages, usually separated by an extra layer of security. And for the campground especially, can you take your car onto the campgrounds to your tent or not, right? Some festivals have just like, yeah, plop everything down in a corner and you're good. Some have specific parking areas, and that makes a difference. Little side note, don't assume that you will have a stable cell or Wi-Fi on site. It's getting better, but still, again, we are a bit isolated. You are having tens of thousands of people. So try to have any info you need, at least locally. So now you have all the info you need. Time to get packing. What and how much you take will widely differ depending on the kind of event and how you travel. But just a few things to consider when putting together your gear, right? What do you want to buy on site, and instead of bringing it from home, right? Especially everything that's food and drink related. It will also depend on if you want to make your own food or buy on concession stands. You might have to haul all that gear for half a mile over uneven terrain, especially in the cases I had before with where the car is not where the tent is. You are possibly going to need like some smallish bag for the stuff you want on you during the day, right? Like reasonably pickpocket safe and mosh pit ready if that's your jam. That bag and its content need to pass infield security, because not everything that you're allowed to have in your tent, let's say a long cooking knife, is allowed in field, right? Includes, by the way, most drink containers. So you can have like your glass bottles in campsites, but not in field. So, and another side note, once you have found your little cozy spot, lug your gear all there, set everything up right away instead of at 2 a.m. in the dark when you're drunk. So now that we're all set up, let's go to what we're actually going to see on the medical side a little bit. I'm going to structure this a little bit like using a mnemonic that is very common in assessing patients, which is called ABCDE, starting with AB, which stands for airways and breathing. So we don't see too many common diagnoses in that area. But one thing I'd recommend, especially now that we've gotten used to it, bring some face masks, because if it's dry, it's going to get dusty. And even people without asthma regularly come in with respiratory problems. And also, unfortunately, we're seeing more and more pyros in the crowd here and there. Sometimes even part of the show, so brought in by the artists, but that's a different story. Small tangent again, since I touched on asthmatics, if you are an asthmatic, diabetic, need any other daily medication for any other reason, check if you can store it with the medical team. Especially with like larger events, there's a good chance they are gonna offer like to store your refrigerated medication at least. All right, moving on to circulation. So that mostly covers like blood loss and other fluid problems. So blood loss, luckily, is very rarely an issue. Dehydration, on the other hand, is very common. I mean, you're out in the sun for 8+ hours, you're jumping and dancing, you're going to need water by the gallons, right? And no, beer doesn't count, even if it's light American beer. So, because I'm not your mom, but something tells me you'd rather be in front of a stage than snoring in the drunk tank. So pace yourselves. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Next up, disability and dysfunction. It's not a very descriptive term, but the mnemonic wanted a D, so we're going with that. It is a bit of a catch-all for anything affecting or impairing your consciousness, right? Including alcohol, but we already covered that. What we haven't covered yet are all the other narcotics you might be inclined to, right? Again, I'm not your mom. A few important things. Medics won't judge you for being high as balls. They won't rat you out to security unless you attack them. But we need to know, right? We need to know what you've taken because it influences our treatment of you. And again, other side note, if you want to take something, maybe don't buy your gear on site from a stranger, right? Know yourself what you are consuming. And also, maybe don't try new stuff for the first time, right? The whole situation is going to be overwhelming as it is. So maybe don't add another layer to it. Another very common issue we see is sunstroke. I touched on it before, bears repeating. You're going to be in the scorching sun for hours. You're basically frying your brain, right? So do yourself a favor and wear some kind of hat, right? Get some shade if you feel dizzy or start getting a headache. Doesn't have to be this big, but whatever floats your boat. I thought I got a pink, but that's fine. Okay. Next. Finally, we come to E for exposure. This is a bit of an umbrella for anything else exterior that affects the patient, like including injuries. Since we already talked about sunstrokes, let's expand this to sunburns in general, right? Now, turning red like Mr. Krabs is not something that regularly needs medical attention. But again, you're out there for hours, and I've seen blisters the size of my hand, and that can have some serious physiological implications. Some other things protection-wise, people forget on a frequent basis. Sunglasses. Just as a little aside, stages will, when possible, be facing north if it's geographically and logistically possible, because we don't want to fry the singers on stage. But that also means the audience will usually be looking in the general direction of the sun. Earplugs should be obvious, right? But still, most festivals even give you free earplugs nowadays. Use them. And condoms, yes. You'd be surprised how many prescriptions for Plan B change hands during a festival weekend. You might not plan for a hookup, but be prepared for one, please. There's a running joke at some festivals when we say that usually there are more people coming back from festivals than went to. All right. Until now, we've mostly been talking about warm weather, right? But on the flip side, wet weather can be devastating if you're not prepared, right? This applies to both your clothing during the day as well as your tent during the night. So don't forget your raincoat, and maybe don't rely on those cheap, like $20 throw tents and a little blanket to keep you warm at night, right? All right. I'm gonna do one more thing on exposure, because I already mentioned injuries. And if there's only one thing I want you to take away from this, one single thing, wear some decent shoes. I can tell you that bad footwear accounts directly or indirectly for maybe half of all injuries we see, right? Whether you're spraining an ankle, walking or dancing on uneven terrain, whether you're tripping, slipping, or anything else and injuring other parts of your body, whether you are standing on some hot surfaces or sharp objects, or just other people stepping on your toes, right? I'm not saying you need to walk around in work boots, although I personally do, even off duty, but that's because I have them with me anyway. I'm saying keep in mind that you will be walking several miles a day over multiple days and partying. Remember what I said about all the gear you had to haul to your campground at the beginning? Imagine having to haul all of it back after 3 days of partying with a hobbled foot. Not fun. All right. I'm going to finish with some miscellaneous things. I didn't fit everywhere else, but I just want to at least mention. Obviously, everything is more fun and safer with friends, right? So if you can, get a little group of people together. Also allows you to pool your tents and your food, etc. Plan on not having access to a power outlet and plan your phone usage accordingly, right? Power banks are your friend. Some festivals are starting to offer like charging stations, some even for free. And small tip from me would be leave your power bank to charge, not your phone. Again, and I said it before again and again, a festival is a marathon, not a sprint. It is designed to have something for everybody. And if you are remotely curious or open-minded, you will want to do more and see more than there are hours in a day, right? Just at some point, just tell yourself, okay, chill. Yeah, please clean up after the event. Yeah, that's actually a thing. Yeah. One thing that is being offered more and more also, tattoos, piercing, and other body mods. Just don't, right? Just a straight up, don't do that at a festival. This is not a knock on all the vendors and tattoo shops who offer it, right? But no amount of sanitizing on their part can save you if you are rolling in the dirt afterwards. And an infected tattoo is, ugh. All right. One last thing for all the budding social engineers in the audience who might want to social engineer their way backstage. And since the internet tells me that listicles are all the rage, here are top 5 things to do backstage. Number 5, get run over by a truck full of equipment. Number 4, snap a blurry pic of an artist in the 10 seconds between they leave stage and disappear into a van. Number 3, get run over by an ATV. Number 2, hide from security in the ditch. And number one, get run over by forklifts. In case the sarcasm isn't obvious, just stay out of areas you don't belong in, right? Hundreds and thousands of people are working in a high pressure environment and don't need some idiot standing in their way. Okay? That's just my personal pet peeve, but okay. And thank you. And in general, just stay safe and don't worry about us getting bored, because we'd rather just enjoy the scenery with you than patch you up. And that's it from me.
All
Do we have
right.
any open questions in the chat? I've seen some comments I didn't touch on, like cleaning up after yourself, obvious.
Yeah, it looks like we're not seeing any real open questions, just kind of
Some
generic
commenting.
conversation.
Some points are really good. They're not really primarily in the medical thing or things I see all the time, so I didn't touch on them. But yeah.
All right. Well, overall, that was a great talk on both of your points. Hoping that one day we can see each other at a festival and we can be around people again.
I wouldn't mind, so preferably not because I'm triaging you.
Yeah, it looks like we're slowly starting to get things a little back to normal.
Yeah.
I can say that I just had a concert finally get rescheduled to August. That looks like it might actually happen. So plenty good there.
I've gone 14 months without a concert. I still know the last one I went to, and I'm still annoyed by it.
My last concert was January of 2020.
Yeah, February for me, like mid-February, but still.
It's awful. Well,
yeah.
Thanks for the talk, and
thank you for having
see
me
you in the chat if anybody else comes up with any additional questions.
Yeah, I'll be under kluthulhu. I'll be in the chat, in the track 2 chat for, let's say, at least the next hour. So have fun